Hello and welcome. My name is Bill Haberkorn and I work for Transwest Truck Trailer RV here in beautiful Frederick, Colorado. Today I'm going to be going over the Silverleaf control systems that are found on our Newmar products. You'll find them in the New Air, Mountain Air, London Air, Essex, top of the line King Air, and also the new Supreme Air that has just come out on the Super C chassis. So here's the panel, and there's two of these in everything but the New Air and the Supreme Air. There's only one in each one of those products, but in everything else, you have a panel back here in the bedroom and then a panel over the driver's station that you can access the different functions of the Silverleaf. So in this screen, which is the home screen, you're going to see that it gives us our freshwater or our tank monitoring system, the date, the outside temperature, the time, like I said, the tanks, my house and chassis batteries, voltages, and then below that is my shore, which is my 110 power coming in, and it gives me how many amps we're drawing on each leg and what my voltage is on each leg. So in here, I can go through and look at the different screens and different functions inside the Silverleaf. So we're going to switch to the AC power screen, and what this is going to give me is again the voltages and the amperage draw, and then this will allow me to change the charge rate of the inverter. So this is how many amps the inverter is going to draw to keep the batteries charged up. And I can go in, let's go back. I can't change anything here, but I can, except for turning the inverter on and off. So in the when I turn the inverter on, it's going to standby because right now we're plugged in. So it's just allowing the incoming power to pass through it and then to go into the microwave and the rest of the components that are being used inside the motorhome. So if I unplug it, then the inverter automatically takes over and controls or supplies power to all those components. When I go to the DC power screen, this is going to give me my battery voltage on my house side and what the inverter is doing and how many amps it is throwing at the battery. This is where I can change settings on my charger thing. So right now it's telling me that the charger is enabled, which is automatic. That's the default setting. So whenever you plug in, the charger takes over, starts to charge the batteries. The inverter is also enabled, which is in the standby mode at this point. And then my max charge draw, and this is how many amps the inverter is using to charge the batteries. And this you can change. The default, I think, sits at 30, and you can drop this down to different amperage to allow for more amperage inside the coach for your air conditioners, washer, dryer, your bigger loads. It doesn't affect anything but just how many amps the inverter is throwing at the batteries. If there are any faults in the system, I can come in and I can clear faults, and I can clear warnings in this screen as well. The next screen through is just going to give me my Inverter Sense, load sense threshold, which we don't use, but that would be like if it saw 25 watts, it would automatically kick the inverter on, but we set it up so that the inverters are pretty much on all the time. It draws less power actually. The max charge rate is so how much the inverter is going to charge the batteries. The equalize, which is normal charging. We don't equalize on AGM batteries. You would only do that for lead acid, and Newmar doesn't even use lead acid in any of their higher end coaches anymore. And then of course the battery type. Excuse me. Next screen through. This is going to be also inverter settings, and this is going to be when the inverter shuts down and at what voltage, and you can address that. Or you can change that, but we like to keep it around 11.2 so that the inverter doesn't get too low or the voltage doesn't get too low and it doesn't hurt any of the components inside the inverter. The battery rating is how many amp hours for each coach, and it varies upon each coach. So you can go anywhere from 600 up to 1600 amp hours on the King Air because it's got 16 batteries. Low AC cutoff is going to be where you want the inverter to stop allowing pass-through current and stop working if outside external voltage drops below 95 volts on this one. Absorption time is this one set up for 3 hours and 0 minutes. That's just topping off, or it's doing a how do I say this? So you have three types of charge. You have a bulk charge, an absorption charge, and a float charge. Bulk charge is going to bring the batteries up to about 70%. Absorption charge is going to take those batteries up to about 95%, and it really throws amperage at them to do a fine deep charge to the batteries, and then float's going to top off that last 5%. And so like I said, on this one, absorption is set up for 3 hours. And then load sensing, which is the ups, which was on the other screen, is disabled here, and we don't use that. Load sense interval again, they've got it set for 2 seconds, but it's not being used at this point. Desired mode is always operating. And anywhere you see any of these little pinwheels, you can change that, or you can, if you tap it, it will not let you into the next screen, just because you don't want to go in and change a bunch of the deeper settings. It will affect everything that's happening inside the motorhome, especially electrical. Low battery cutout delay. So if the battery gets too low, then it's going to drop this one out in like about 10 seconds. And so it shuts the inverter down so it doesn't damage itself. High battery cutouts, anything above 16.5 volts. The charge cycle itself is a 3-stage, which is the multi-stage that I talked about earlier. Recharge voltage, that has to do with the chassis. So if it sees that the chassis battery is getting low as well, it can it can start charging. It ties together a charge solenoid and charges both batteries at the same time. Next one is auto recharge. That's enabled. So that's basically that default setting I was talking about at the very beginning. So whenever you plug it in, it automatically is charging the batteries. Force charge is not used on this one. Default battery temp is warm, and that's for the type of battery that you have, and that's for telling the inverter how much to charge the batteries at what speed and what to top them off at. So usually you set them up for warm, which is going to be 95%. If you're in really, really cold climate, you can change that to cold setting, and it's going to take a little bit longer to charge the batteries up because it doesn't want to damage them. The next screen on here is the high AC cutoff, and this is set at 135 volts. So anything above that, the inverter is going to shut down to protect itself. Low AC frequency, this is the hertz. And the hertz is the cycling of the AC power coming in. And the minimum that it wants to see is 55 hertz. Anything below that, it shuts down. Anything above 65 hertz, it also shuts down. Stack mode, if it had more than one inverter in it, you would have a primary, a secondary, so on and so forth. But these, everything but the King Air only uses one inverter, and the King Air uses a second inverter, and that second inverter is basically for the middle air conditioner so that you can have that on going down the road. And then device number is just the device of the inverter. Okay, now the next screen we're going to go to is my genset screen. And it's basically here I can start and stop the generator. Lock is a safety lockout. So like say you have it in a building and you don't want the generator to start, there's a safety lockout so that it cannot start with inside that building. And that could be either stepping on the brake pedal, turning the ignition on, any type of a function like that, turning the key on. The triggers are down below. Let's go back to this. So when you go to use it first time of the year, you want to clear the locks, so that allows the generator to start in the AGS mode and that kind of stuff. Like I said, triggers are going to be battery auto chargers disabled. So you could kick that on and enable it so that it would automatically come on. My trigger voltage, which is the generator is going to start when it sees the house voltage drop below 11.8 volts. The top off voltage is where it's going to want to shut down. Now, while it's charging, it'll bring the batteries way up. You'll probably see them around 14.2, 14.5. After it charges and goes to the float charging, it's going to look at the battery temp and battery voltage through an algorithm, and if it's satisfied at the 12.5, then it just kind of shuts the charger off. And then the top off runtime is in that float category, and it's going to shut the inverter off after 45 minutes. I think that's about it here. Go to the water screen. That's again going to give me my tanks, my black, my fresh, and my gray. And from there you can turn the water pump on and off, and you can also use the autofill function. And if I click that, so it's set up in the features settings of the Silverleaf, but basically it's going to kick on at 90% and shut off at 100%. So anything below 90%, the autofill is going to kick on if I leave it in the auto filling position like that. Next screen is my climate screen. So this controls all the air conditioners / heat pumps, as well as the Oasis and my heat exchangers for my Oasis. So if I hit all, that's going to run everything the same temperature. It gives me my living room, kitchen, bath, and bed. And from there I can turn the cool on, cool off, set my temperatures individually, or for my cooling. Same thing with heat. I can turn the heat on and off here, and then I can set my temperatures. The Oasis is the heating system. So what it does is it has a diesel-fired burner, and it gives you continuous heat, continuous hot water whenever it's on, whenever the diesel burner's on. The next selection source is electric 1 and electric 2. What those are is electric elements inside a boiler tank, and they draw about 1200 amps or 1200 watts apiece, and they'll heat up the antifreeze that's in the boiler tank. It's definitely not as efficient as the burner, but it does work well above, like, say 55 degrees, and give you quite a bit of hot water and give you heat. The way I kind of tell people is on electric 1, it'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes of a hot shower, and it'll heat the coach down to about 50 degrees. If you have electric 1 and electric 2 on, it'll give you about 20 minutes of hot water for a shower or for doing laundry or whatever, and it'll heat the coach down to about 40 degrees, maybe 35. Anything below that, you definitely want to have the burner running, or you want to, no, I guess that's about it. You definitely want to have the burner running.
So if you go into climate again,
yeah,
and you see that it says living room, kitchen, bath, and bed, I can operate all 4 of those zones individually as well for temperature, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's what I was going to get to. So, like she was saying, I can individually control each zone. So if I want to have it cooler in the front, warmer in the back, I can go through and set each zone independently. So living room, let's say I've got it on heat at 67. The kitchen, I don't want it as hot. I can drop that down to 65. And I can do this on both heat and air conditioning. Bath only has a heater. So it's just going to let you allow the heat source to set the set temp for the heat source in the mid bath. And then the bedroom and the back of the coach is also controlled that same way. Now I can turn the fans on individually, and all that does is just circulate air throughout the AC system. It doesn't turn the air conditioner on for cooling, it just turns the fan on for forced air. Normally I'd tell people to leave that in the auto position, because you can turn the furnace on, you can turn the heat on, and the next thing you know, the roof air conditioner fan's coming on, and you're like, well, is it heating? Is it cooling? So I usually tell people just to run it in the auto mode. That way it takes the confusion out of it. The other nice function about this is you can have an automatic generator start just off the air conditioner. So like, say you walk out in the morning, you're in Moab, it's 60 degrees, you left your dogs in here, come back at noon, it's 100 degrees in here. You can have the air conditioners automatically start the generator and come on and come back to a cooled coach. And you can do that just by setting your temp there and running it up and down. And each zone can control the AGS as well. Okay?
All right.
And we'll shut everything down. Okay, the next thing I have is floor control. And from here, this is the tile floor heating system. And what this does is it has an incremental scale of 1 to 10. And so what that does is, out of 20 minutes, it's a 20-minute time cycle. So if I set it for 10, it's going to run for about 18 minutes out of 20, shut down for 2. It doesn't have a temp sense. It just runs, and that's how they kind of regulate what your floor temp is. So if I set it on 2, it's going to run for 4 minutes out of 20, so on and so forth. And then the front's going to basically cover from the dash back to the bathroom or to the mid-bath area. The rear is going to be the bedroom and the rear bath, and then the mid is just going to be kind of in the hallway right in front of the refrigerator here. And they're all on a slide scale, so you can kind of pull them down, run them up. And store is basically the same as being off. It doesn't really do anything. All right. Now we get into the features of the Silverleaf system. I can set the clock here. I can set the time, the date, my climate options. So basically what that means is if I have it in the automatic mode, the Silverleaf system itself is going to tell, basically, so if you're calling for heat, the Silverleaf system is going to turn the heat pumps on, and then it's going to, if the heat pumps can't heat the coach up quick enough or within a certain time frame, then it's going to kick the floor heat on, or the baseboard heat, not the tile heat. So it's kind of confusing for people at times. Usually I tell them to run it in the manual mode, and you have different sources here. So primary is going to be your roof air conditioners for a heat source. Secondary is going to be the Oasis and your heat exchangers. And the other things you can do here is you can set it up for automatic, which means Silverleaf's going to take over. And at that point you would kick this over to automatic as well. Or you can do just primary, which is the roof air conditioners, secondary, which is the Oasis and the heat exchangers, or both on at the same time. Like I said, I usually tell people to set it for the secondary only. It's a lot better heat source and it's less confusing. And then my AC lower limit, this is how low I can set the temps on my air conditioner. So the factory default is set for 65. I usually, you can change that to whatever you want depending on how cold you want it in here. There's enough cooling in this coach that if you have all the air conditioners on a 80, 85 degree day, you can basically have a meat hanger in here. It gets cold enough in here. That's what else do we have? Okay, climate options. This is where I can get in and I can set different times and schedules for the air conditioners and the heater to come on throughout the day. So I can set like 72 in the morning. Then I can go and set it for like 76 at noon. Change it throughout the day at different points throughout the day. And I can set my cooling and my heat settings however needed to be. It gets pretty confusing, but if people like to play and change that and mess with it all the time, that function is there for you. Same thing with your nighttime settings and then your away settings. So when you leave the coach, if you don't want it to be 65 degrees in here, you can set it for 80 so it's not baking hot in here. And then when you come back, basically you can hit the home button and it'll bring you back to your regular AC settings. Generator settings. This is going to be you're telling the Silverleaf system what type of generator it has in it, and these are owning specific specs for this. So preheat time, max cranking time, max stopping time. That's all set up from Silverleaf at the factory. Let's see. Auto gen start settings. So this is where I can kick the AGS on. So if I can do it here, or I can go back to the home screen and I can hit the auto gen, and it's going to take me again to this same screen. And basically I turn it on and off from here. So I can enable it. And right now I've got it enabled to come on at low voltage. So anything below 11.8 volts, it sees that for about 2 minutes. It's going to start the generator off and let it run. The same thing with the top off voltage and the run time. It's the same settings that we had for the generator before. And then this is just your AGS demands. So you've got manual override, house charging, house top off, chassis charging, your air conditioners, and then your scheduled exercise. Let's go back. Warnings configuration. So this is just on the home screen. If I go back, let's go back to the home screen. I've got a little green light up there telling me that everything is okay. There's different warnings if battery voltage gets too low, if water tank is too low, if the black and the gray tank are too full. It'll give you warnings about that. If there's any communication errors throughout the Silverleaf system, it'll give me that communication error up here as well, and it'll just give you a red light and say COM error. But to see what's going on with it, where was I at? That's my warnings configuration. So like I can disarm it or I can arm it for what we talked about earlier, the gray tank, the black tank, the fresh tank alarm level, what it's going to kick on at, my battery alarm level, and that's, what else do we have? Battery warning level, so when the batteries reach below 11.7, you can change that, turn it up and down. Battery chassis, or chassis battery alarm is armed. Chassis battery warning level, bay temperature warning level, and bay temperature alarm level. So basically, if the temperature in the bay is getting too cold, it'll tell you that, and it'll say, hey, you know, let's turn on the Oasis, let's keep everything from freezing up. Let's go to the next screen. This is my autofill configuration, and this is where I was talking in the home screen where I can hit the autofill, or in the water screen, and this is what, these are the settings for that. So in my autofill mode, I've got it set to auto, my start level is set to 90, my stop level is set to 100. I don't like seeing the stop level at 100 because driving down the road, the water in the tank starts to slosh around, and the siphon on the side of the tank starts siphoning that water out. So usually I set those at about 90% and I do my start level at 80%. Keeps it from siphoning out, because you can get to your campground, have a full tank, get to where you're going, and you got 75% water and you're wondering, where did all that water go? Well, it's because it was overfilled. Max time allowed, that's the run time for the autofill, is 5 minutes, and then run after is set for 0. And then run after is 30 seconds. And that's just how long after it reaches the full level that autofill is going to stay open. I jumped around again, didn't I? System component list, this is just Silverleaf, and it's just communicating with all of its different modules, and it's just going to pull them up, make sure everything's there. If it sees a fault or if it sees a module not there, you're going to see that on the home screen in that little red COM light error. Monitor diagnostics. This is just going to go through, give me all my software versions, RC, your addresses, your park brake status, engine speed, vehicle speed. So these are all my diagnostic screens, and it's just going to go through, and this is how Silverleaf's communicating with the engine, with all the lighting. Everything's tied together in these buses, so it's all run through on a CAN bus system, and everything has to be communicating or it's going to throw faults all over the place. Let's see, what do we got next? Tank configuration, that's just going to be my fresh gray, black, and LP tank. And that's just, these are the settings they set up with at the factory when they go through. And then what the size of the tanks are, 105, 65, 45. Fresh dry calibrate, gray dry calibrate, that stuff, I really wouldn't recommend getting into any of these screens because you can completely mess up your calibrations. If you get to a point where you need to go into these, please give me a call and I'll walk you through how to do all these calibrations. AC power history is just going to tell you within the last 200 cycles what you were plugged into, whether it was shore power, whether it was generator, if you had low voltage, all that kind of stuff's going to show up on your AC power, AC history screen. Monitor configuration. This is going to be basically, I can change the lighting. I can change, oh, so everything's locked right now. My speaker volume, which is the beeping for my button presses, and then auto dimming to fully dark. They've got it shut off, but you can do that at night so that you don't have the screen bugging you while you're trying to sleep. And you can just change that to on. Settings locked. Awesome. Okay. So this is monitor configuration, the second screen in it. So this is going to just tell me daytime, when it start, when my daytime is going to start, what I want it to go back to after a 15-minute timeout or whatever, and my screen brightness, and then we go to nighttime screen, and this is going to tell what time nighttime comes on, what screen it defaults back to, nighttime idle timeout, and then my nighttime screen brightness. Yeah, this is really, these are the factory settings that we go in and change if need be, but I wouldn't recommend going into any of this stuff at this point. Monitor configuration, yeah. So if you get past, where are we at? The nighttime screen setting, I wouldn't go anywhere past that to go in. And actually, if you do go in there and you start changing stuff, it's not going to let you because everything's locked up. So you can only go so deep into the system anyway. Where are we at? Climate screen configuration is kind of the same thing. It tells you how it's set up, and this is how, when you build the coach, you put in all these settings so that it knows what type of air conditioners it has, what type of furnace or hydronic heating system, how many air conditioners it has, that kind of stuff. If I go in and try and change it, it's not going to let me. So that's a nice function, but it can be kind of aggravating at times for customers. But like I said, if you get into any of those screens and it won't let you into it, give me a call or give Newmar a call. I can walk you through it. They can walk you through how to change stuff if you really need to. Logo is going to be my Newmar splash screen. And then the last one is my clock. I think that's it. Oh, test the touch screen. So that where you can, like if you're getting a touch screen that's really not, it's not sensitive enough or too sensitive, then you can go in and you can change that sensitivity here and you can test it. It's just going to, if I hit it, it's going to give me my button presses. So that's how you would set the sensitivity on this. And then reboot is just reboots the monitor, just in case there's any problems. And if you get a touch screen that's really acting up, it doesn't hurt to reboot it. It's just going to shut it down, go back to your Newmar splash screen, and reboot itself. One thing it's that with all these electronics and all these coaches anymore, you get a lot of miscommunication, a lot of them act up. So first thing I'm going to tell you, if you have a lot of problems, is to shut everything down. Shut your batteries off, unplug the coach, let it sit for a couple minutes, turn everything back on, see if that doesn't fix your problem. 95% of the time it does. Because of all the electronics. I think that's about all that we need to go through on this screen. Like I said, I can start the generator, I can turn the autofill on, I can turn the pump on and off. My auto gen function is there. And I can turn the engine block heater on and off from here. I think that's it. I appreciate you guys joining us today, and I hope you learned something. And if you have questions, feel free to give us a call here at Transwest. We'd be more than happy to take care of you.
Do you want to give your phone number so that they can call you if they have any questions?
You can reach me at 720-917-5863. And again, my name is Bill Haberkorn. Thank you. Bye-bye.